When you play the latest game in a popular series, it's hard to imagine previous installments were ever less than this immersive, technically impressive, and beautiful to look at. Unless it's Duke Nukem Forever.
Time to stop pissing around and get this big guy back into action.
But then you go back and look at the very first entry in that famous video game series, and you wonder how the heck these flawed first games managed to get even one sequel, let alone an entire franchise. Consider these long-running and much-loved series that we can't believe made it past their shaky first starts. These Street Fighter fighting games are widely acknowledged as the best fighting games in existence, with excellent, varied characters, terrific music and stages, and gameplay so perfectly balanced that competitive Street Fighter matches regularly draw thousands to events like EVO and CEO, which is all very impressive when you remember that the series began with Street Fighter in 1987, which was bad. There's only one character for you to play as, who is Ryu, and he moves like a defective shopping trolley full of house bricks. Landing a hit on an opponent is largely a matter of luck, as Ryu can only strike things that are 6 inches in front of him. Not a problem for your opponents, however, who will mercilessly beat you senseless if you dare to stray into their half of the screen. Speaking of opponents, despite their appearances later in the series, none of them are very interesting here, and the less said about their digitized speech, the better.
Don't forget there are many doors that you all over the world.
Of course, Ryu has access to his special moves, the Shoryuken and the Hadoken, or at least he would if there was any way of reliably pulling them off without getting carpal tunnel syndrome. Getting that footage took 20 minutes. The point is, I don't think anyone would have played Street Fighter and thought, yes, this is a series that I will still be playing in 30 years' time. Probably because I will have died of acute carpal tunnel syndrome by then. Looking at the incredible artistic and technical achievement that is Super Mario Odyssey, it's easy to forget that Mario games weren't always like this. Heck, even if you can remember further back, it's easy to forget that Super Mario Bros., with its side-scrolling worlds and satisfying action, wasn't the first game in the venerable franchise. That honour belongs to the 1983 arcade game Mario Bros., in which Mario and Luigi, in their familiar role as plumbers, must investigate the New York sewers and kill a bunch of turtles who are living down there. They're not even teenage ninjas. This game featured very little of the charm of later Mario games, and it was a single-screen game with no music, annoying sound effects, and a core gameplay loop in which you headbutted a turtle, then kicked it to death in a maneuver that became tediously repetitive by the third time you did it. Of course, it wasn't just turtles. Later levels introduced crabs and some kind of insect, but really, this was just the same thing over and over again. Anyway, if you'd have asked me at the time, well, I wouldn't have said anything, I hadn't been born, but if you'd asked someone who was capable of speaking at the time, I imagine their money wouldn't be on Nintendo making a universally beloved mascot out of that weird plumber who was always kicking turtles to death. And prior to that, I'd only been known for animal cruelty. Yeah, try putting that on a box of cereal. 2017's Wolfenstein 2, The New Colossus, was a daring masterpiece of action, storytelling, and character that combined bombastic Nazi-killing gunplay with real warmth and depth, earning a BAFTA nomination for its narrative design. All of which is a far cry from its original incarnation. No, not Wolfenstein 3D, but rather the predecessor to that, namely 1981's Castle Wolfenstein for the Apple II. In this top-down proto-stealth game, your job was to escape from the titular castle with the Nazi war plans, a feat you accomplished by sprinting through rooms, shooting people, and occasionally putting on enemy uniforms and eating German delicacies. While it was innovative in its use of stealth-based gameplay and featured some early attempts at digitized speech, due to the technical limitations of systems at the time, it was horrible to look at and took about 10 minutes to complete from start to finish. Plus, there wasn't even a bit where you fought Hitler in a massive mech suit, something Wolfenstein 3D made sure to rectify.
Eva, auf Wiedersehen.
Despite all this, people clearly saw something in Castle Wolfenstein, as it became a hit and was followed by a sequel, Beyond Castle Wolfenstein in 1984, and then the genre-defining Wolfenstein 3D in 1992. Still, hard to believe that all of that came from a game as simple as Castle Wolfenstein. Yes, what he said.
It's time to kick ass and chew bubble gum. I'm all out of gum. Come get some.
Okay, disregarding Duke Nukem Forever for a second, Duke Nukem 3D and its various spin-offs, updates and map packs were a bona fide cultural phenomenon in the late 1990s. In fact, the only reason Duke Nukem Forever got delayed so many times is because, being the sequel to Duke Nukem 3D, it had to be absolutely perfect to stand any chance of measuring up to its predecessor. That wasn't a problem for 1996's Duke 3D, however, because all that had to follow was the original Duke Nukem games, in which Duke Nukem was a disgruntled TV viewer in a pink gilet who set out to kill aliens because they interrupted his daytime TV viewing. Duke Nukem and its sequel Duke Nukem 2 were platform games in which, instead of booting aliens in the face and firing RPGs at huge bosses, Duke bunny hopped around the place collecting power-ups and shooting boxes. Certainly, you wouldn't imagine that this was a character that, 5 years later, would become an ass-kicking, one-liner spouting, alien-killing machine. Guess he switched to Sam Raimi films instead of Oprah. 2013's Grand Theft Auto V is one of the most ambitious video games ever devised. It's a huge, sprawling open world that includes cities, wilderness, mountains, and miles of highway for you to explore, discover, and drive cars off of. It's also the most recent entry in a series that began back in 1997 with the original Grand Theft Auto, a top-down driving game that, though it featured many of the hallmarks of the GTA series, such as doing crimes, getting out of your car, and running people over, was a lot more limited in its scope. For a start, there wasn't much story to speak of. Your crim of choice just had to reach a set score, at which point the level would be over, and you'd receive a dubious cutscene as a reward.
Now it's time for you to find out why they call me the donkey, huh?
There wasn't a whole lot of variety in the missions, and the whole thing felt more like a fun diversion than a gripping, compelling video game. That said, it is the only Grand Theft Auto game to feature playable female protagonists, so there's that. Even if top-down, everyone looks like just a handful of crime-doing pixels. Grand Theft Auto 2 brought us more of the same, but it was Grand Theft Auto 3, when the series went fully 3D, that things really took off, propelling it to where it is today, the fourth best-selling video game franchise of all time. Although I think some people might have guessed that would happen themselves when they tried using the horn button while on foot in GTA 1 and realised that it made their character burp and fart. I think this is going to be big, guys.
I started out with nothing. Just a kid from the streets with nothing to lose. Then I met Julius, and everything changed.
Welcome to the 3rd Street Saints.
Speaking of Grand Theft Auto, you know who really wanted to be Grand Theft Auto? Saints Row 1. The original Saints Row, released in 2006, saw you as a member of the 3rd Street Saints gang, who was out to take over the city of Stillwater by battling rival gangs, and the cops, and the fundamental basics of fashionable menswear.
It's there for the taking, if you got what it takes.
The game itself was fine, if uninspired, but something happened between Saints Row 1 and Saints Row 2 that made the developers decide that if they couldn't outdo Grand Theft Auto, they could sure as hell outweird it.
Undead cleanup ain't exactly in our wheelhouse, but we'll give it a whirl.
That's how we ended up with a series that includes casual streaking, over-the-top superpowers, a bit where everyone went to hell and met Shakespeare, and a tense spaceship escape sequence set to Hadaway's What Is Love.
Radio signals bounce around space for... Quiet! This is Hadaway.
It's also the series that gave us such memorable weapons as the Inflato Ray and, of course, the dubstep gun. Still, kudos to Saints Row for finding its niche, even if that niche is being the game where your character kicks people in the nuts a lot and sings in their car. Your move, GTA. The original Metal Gear came out on forgotten computer system the MSX2 in 1987 and bears about as much resemblance to the Metal Gear series today as this drawing of Solid Snake I just did in MS Paint does to the actual Solid Snake. True, you played as Solid Snake and the focus was on avoiding enemies rather than fighting them, but confined to 2 dimensions rather than 3, the gameplay lacked the tense, heart-in-mouth suspense that characterized the series from Metal Gear Solid onwards. Still, the series' dedication to memorably weird and terrible character names was there from the get-go, including such classics as Shoot Gunner, Machine Gun Kid, and, Coward Duck. Metal Gear 2 was much the same, but added bizarre puzzles such as this one, in which you needed to hatch an owl from an egg in order to convince a guard that it was evening so he'd turn off a laser fence. Keep an eye out for that in the upcoming Death Stranding. In short, it must have been hard at the time to imagine that a simple 2D stealth game like Metal Gear could be the first in a series that culminated with the astonishingly ambitious and creative Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain. But then in a world where guards assume it's the evening the second they hear an owl, I guess anything's possible. Those are some of the biggest video game series with the most humble beginnings. Drop your own favourite series with wobbly first efforts in the comments below, why not? And be sure to like and subscribe and turn on notifications for more videos like this from Outside Xbox every week. Thanks for watching!